does Hideo Kojima get his ideas? In this podcast, we take a deep dive into his brain and shed light on his creative process. Hideo Kojima presents Brain Structure.
こんにちは、小島秀夫です。ポッドキャストプログラム、Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure.
Hello, Hideo Kojima here with the podcast program Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure. And here's my partner for today.
Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Keighley from the Game Awards and TGA, the Jeff's Answer. Hello, Mr. Kojima. It's great to talk with you. Yes, we were just wrapping up the Game Awards here in Los Angeles when this is airing, so hopefully many people have seen TGA. We worked all year on it, and of course, it was such an honor to have you with me in Los Angeles, but we're taping this before the TGA, even though there was the big announcement at TGA that we'll talk about. But today, we're going to talk about Death Stranding, which is, of course, the start of Kojima Productions and the first ever title that you released. And it's a game that was very special and close to my heart that, we were able to work with you on it for many times. I remember at E3, you were with us when you teased the letters DS on stage with me on the YouTube show, and then you announced at the PlayStation press conference. And over the years, we had many great opportunities to work with you on trailers for the first Death Stranding. I think we did 2 of them at Game Awards, and we even worked together on the intro movie for Kojima Productions that we did at Comic-Con one year. So Death Stranding, we just wanted to talk a little bit more about that game and what it's meant to me and to you and to all the players around the world. And of course, we're all very excited that you're stepping back into that world. But Hideo, maybe let's rewind back to the start of Death Stranding. And I know when you founded Kojima Productions, you really, you were in a naked place, for lack of a better term, and that you were starting anew and you had to create something brand new from scratch. You had defined the game engine, which you did with the Decima engine from Guerrilla. But you wanted to create, I know, a story that was entirely new. What was the original inspiration for Death Stranding?
Well, I went independent on December 16th, 2015. I didn't have a studio. The only things I had were 4 staff members, my computer, and my iPhone. And from there, I had to create a new game. But what I was hearing from friends and from users around the world was that they were expecting a AAA title as usual, but one with a completely new gameplay, look, and world settings. They said it had to be a Hideo Kojima game, meaning it had to have a theme, a message, and a story. I had a few ideas in mind for what I wanted to make, and Death Stranding happened to be the one that best suited our style and one we felt we could work our hardest on. I knew I had to make an open world game, so I kept that in mind as I searched for the right engine for the job. That's when I found Guerrilla's Decima engine, and they were kind enough to me to use it. And though we are in the middle of a pandemic now, at the time I never dreamed that something like this would happen. But even back then, there was isolation and fragmentations all over the world. So I wanted to make that the theme. And while games these days are all about battling, I wanted to create a game that connected people. I often use the analogy of a stick and a rope. There are stick games where people fight, but I wanted mine to encompass the concept of a rope used to connect and bring people together. So that was the start.
Yeah, the concept, as you said, of Sam being a porter and moving through the environment. A lot of people, as you said, were wondering what the gameplay was that you wanted to create with Death Stranding. When you look back on the conception of the game and the final product that you created, do you think you achieved your vision of what you set out to do with Death Stranding?
Yeah, I would say so. I think theme-wise and gameplay-wise, we created what we had in mind. Especially the social strand system, the SSS. I was a little worried at first regarding the gameplay concept of being loosely connected with other people on the internet, but I think it worked out well in the end. The look of the game or the setting is all pretty much the same right now. World War I, World War II, or futuristic sci-fi, steampunk, and fantasy are all quite common. I wanted to provide a different look to it, and so I used Iceland as one of the concepts in order to incorporate a bit of surrealism to the world. I think this ended up pretty close to what I had imagined at the start, too.
you talked about Iceland, and we should maybe take a minute to talk about Low Roar and Ryan and the song I'll Keep Coming, because that I know was a big inspiration for you. And I remember you were in Iceland actually and found that album. Of course, we're all very sad a few months ago when we lost Ryan at such a young age of just 40. But could you maybe tell us a bit about that song and Ryan and the band and how that inspired Death Stranding?
2016年の6月に最初 E3 で
So I released the first teaser in June of 2016 at E3. I still didn't have a studio then. I was in a temporary office space with very few staff, and that's where we scanned Norman. As far as digital contents go, we basically only had a naked Norman, a naked Lou, a beach, and a whale. And well, that reflected the state that Kojima Productions was in. We were naked. We had no house, no rooms, we didn't even have a sound team put together. And just as I was racking my brain for what I should do, the song I'll Keep Coming by Low Roar popped into my head. I bought their CD at a CD shop in Iceland when I visited there a while back. Their album was playing in the shop and I really liked it. And I'll Keep Coming was in that album. I thought that the concept of the teaser and the lyrics in I'll Keep Coming matched perfectly as my first teaser post-independence. And when I put it all together, it was as if I had intentionally created for this song. The visuals looked like they had been made in sync with the sound. It really was perfect, and that's how we got started.
ローロアのアルバムはその時2枚
Low Roar had released their second album at the time. I had obviously listened to the first album and was good friends with Ryan. I built up the world of Death Stranding in parallel with Ryan's music, and I talked to him about how I wanted to use his music in the game too, not just a teaser. He told me he was working on his third album, and he shared that with me before it was completed. While I went through the process of picking out songs I wanted in the game, they released that third album. And then, when their fourth album was nearly ready, Ryan sent me more songs to choose from that album. In the end, the game was completed just before their fourth album was released, so we worked on it together for a long time. I hadn't been in touch with him lately due to the pandemic. We always gave each other likes on Instagram, and in making DS2, I knew Ryan's songs were essential, so I was going to call him up soon. And that's when the tragic news came in of his passing. I'm completely shocked.
Yeah, no, very, very sad, but I'm glad his music will live on for all of us. And of course, I know DS was very important to him, and we were honored. We had him at, I think it was E3 one year. He performed, and he came to the E3 Coliseum one year and performed for all of us. I'll Keep Coming, which was very special. And yeah, a very beautiful band and a beautiful song. One other thing I wanted to talk about was actually, I remember that year at E3, I remember you ran into Troy Baker backstage and you said to him, "Oh, I might have something for you." And that's when I think I found that he was probably going to be in DS and obviously went on to go play Higgs. But I wanted to ask you about the cast, because you assembled such an eclectic, amazing cast, from Lindsay Wagner to Lea Seydoux to Norman Reedus to Guillermo to Nicholas to Troy to Tommy. I mean, there's so many amazing actors in this game. Tell us a bit about the casting process for Death Stranding. I know it started with Norman, but how quickly did you come up with all the other characters?
その独立した時に何もなかった
So yeah, after going independent, I had nothing. All I had were connections with people, so I followed those connections to make the game. It was the same with casting. I had worked with Norman Reedus during PT. Nicholas Refn and Guillermo del Toro I had relations with prior, and Troy Baker too, who I worked with for Metal Gear Solid 5. I had all these connections, but from the beginning, even during the scenario and concept building stage, I had these castings in mind, like Mads Mikkelsen for Cliff, Lea Seydoux for Fragile, and Lindsay Wagner for Amelie. And so the final cast members were not far off from my original idea. With Matt's, the very first time I met Nicholas, he gave me Matt's address. I think I've said many times on many occasions, but I contacted Matt's and planned to give him a presentation. I visited Nicholas in Denmark to discuss this with him, but at the time, he was doing Neon Demon and was working with Keanu Reeves. So Nicholas kept telling me he thought Keanu was better for the role. And we were at this restaurant in Denmark, and the owner there was like, yeah, I see Mats like every day on TV. So people told me to go with Keanu, but I was always for Mats. I made that character for Mats. And we did a video call the first time around, but then later met up at Comic-Con and pitched the idea to him there.
で一番キャスティングで思い出深いのはリンゼさんなんです。
The most memorable casting for me is Lindsay. She was my number one idol growing up. Whenever I work on a project, I take it on as if it's going to be my last. And so, just in case Death Stranding became my last work, I wanted Lindsay to be a part of it. And well, she agreed to meet with me, but she didn't think kindly of mainstream video games that were all about shooting and fighting with sticks. So, her participation was uncertain. Kyle Cooper let us use his studio space to meet with Lindsay. There, we talked about the concept of the rope and how the other games may be sticks, but mine was a rope. We talked for about 3 hours, and Lindsay really understood me and got on board about joining the cast. I was really happy. I was worried she would decline. I don't know what I would have done in that case.
Was there anyone that you wanted to cast in Death Stranding that you didn't get or said no to you?
ないです、ないです。
No, no one.
That's lucky. That's good to hear.
ちょっと幸か不幸かですね。
For better or worse, I had some sort of connection or a foot in the door with many of these people, regardless of whether or not they were aware of it. Their friends may be my fans, or like in Matt's case, his son was a fan of mine. So I was pretty lucky. And movies are different from games in that movie shoots take 3 or 4 months to film in a closed set, maybe 6 months to a year for big movies. But for games, scenes are shot as the game itself is being made, so it takes a long time. The actors have other movies they work on during this time, and we have to schedule shoots in between their other priorities. Not only that, but the story also changes frequently. We shoot things before the script is finalized. It's not very common for actors to agree to such a project, but everyone understood and put their trust in me. I'm really grateful that they all accepted it.
You mentioned you were rewriting or changing the game. I'm curious, are there like deleted scenes from the game, or what was the biggest change that you made to the story that fans might be interested to hear about?
いや、そんな大きな変化はないですね、エンディング。
No, not really. I didn't make any big changes per se, like cutting the ending or something like that. I did change the details on the characters though. I would spend time with them at performance captures or at dinners, and I really got to see their personalities, like their facial expressions and body movements. And I would add in those details to their characters. For instance, real-life Matt smokes, but Cliff's character at that time wasn't a smoker. But after meeting Matt in person, we went through the process of solidifying his character together.
When you think of the game, how much of it did you rewrite? You said you did many different scenes. Like, was it 20% you redid, or what is the process on Death Stranding? Was it more or less than a regular game?
これはもうデスストだけじゃなくて僕の
This
ゲーム
isn't the case for just Death Stranding. I do this with all of my games, but I write the concept and game design and scenario myself. I direct the performances and create the character and world settings as well, so I try to make improvements all the time. The settings for the characters and the world may be vague at first, but once the cast is set, we can make detailed changes here and there. Even when the costumes and accessories are already decided, detail is the most important thing, so we add in small stuff as we shoot. And when we add stuff in, that may affect the world setting or the story, so we make corrections or supplements to reflect those changes. When the story changes, we need to adjust the game too. This process would be impossible if we were to outsource the scenario writing, which is why we do it all in-house.
ダイハードマンとかしんちゃんの設定で
For example, Die Hardman was just a normal guy in Yoji's first draft. His clothes were different too. Once we created a model with Tommy, we added the mask and changed every detail on his costume. Higgs too. His face was just Troy's face at first, but I wanted to make it kind of Egyptian, so we added in those writings on his forehead. If I raise the bar on one character though, the other ones lose to it, so then I touch up on the details of those other characters. I try to create a nice balance in the end. Another example would be Fragile. Her leather jacket with the spikes that come out, I added those spikes later as a metaphor for her character to stand out more. It wasn't just for Death Stranding. I did this with Metal Gear 2. I do this sort of thing every day, so the staff hate me for it.
Yes, but that's why we love you. The thing I wanted to ask you about was on DS. It was a long, hard project for you being independent. What was the darkest time for you in the development of the game? Was it at the beginning or at the end, or did you have any sort of downtime when you were really feeling like you were worried how the game was turning out, or when you were concerned? Did that ever happen during the development?
そんなになかった。
No, I don't think I was ever that worried. It's not like I had 100 or 150 employees to start, so we gradually built up the studio, and we never had any loss or major confusion. You know, we were trying to create something new, and that's usually a very difficult thing to do. But we made several teasers leading up to it, and during that time, I was able to share my ideas and get consensus from my staff, so it wasn't that hard. There was one incident that was really tough, the 2016 SAG strike. I thought it would end in 2 or 3 months, but it went on for a year. And during that period, we couldn't negotiate with actors about shooting or anything of the sort. Other large studios moved on to hire non-SAG actors. But for us, we had already announced Norman and Mats to the public and weren't about to change that. So that year was hard. I didn't know what was going to happen.
あとはやっぱり新しいスタジオだったので、
And also, I had to handle new staff members since it was a brand new studio. There were veteran staff like Yoji too, but I had to teach the new people my way of making things, my culture, basically. Many people didn't understand, of course, so taking the time to do that was a bit difficult. I needed to be hands-on most of the time, but that's about it, I think, as far as difficult times go.
The game has been out now for, I guess, it's been 3 years, a little more than 3 years since the release of it, which is incredible. And the last time we saw you before TGA this year in person was at TGA 2019 when you won the award for Best Game Direction. And Churches performed and opened the show, and Norman was there. That was a very special night. When you reflect back on the first Death Stranding, were you happy with the response from the critics and the fans? Do you think people understood your intention? Because you were doing something that was different than, as you said, the traditional stick game that's all about just action and combat. Do you think the audience and the media really understood what you were trying to achieve?
そうですね。メディア
Yeah, I think there are people among the media and the users who understood it. I experienced the same thing every time, and it was the same with Metal Gear and Boktai too. But at the very beginning, there are both positive and negative reviews. Whenever you make something brand new, people give their pros and cons. And within the 3 years since the release of Death Stranding, the pandemic happened, which I think led to a change in the reception of the game. The game is on platforms like PlayStation Plus and has reached a wider audience, and even those who are not hardcore gamers have come to enjoy playing Death Stranding. I think it takes 3 to 5 years for a game to receive proper evaluation. For Metal Gear, it wasn't until after 1, 2, and 3 that it gained acceptance and people finally started to understand. So in that same sense, I think Death Stranding will begin to be understood little by little.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think over time, everyone's realized it's a game that has to sort of, you have to sit with it for a little bit, and you have to sort of play it in a less deliberate way. If you can't race through it, you really have to enjoy the experience. So I think as people have been able to, marinate and sort of experience it over time, people have come to see sort of the vision of what you were trying to do. And one of the reasons I was very excited you won the Best Game Direction Award was that you did try something innovative and different with the approach to the game. And that's often something that we should reward, is that games that are different and not just predictable of the same gameplay and the same experience. That's why I think we're all very excited to think about what you're likely doing with DS2, although I know we can't get into any more details than what we saw in the teaser. I can't wait to see where you're going to take the gameplay for DS2.
まあ DS2 はですね、実は DS1 を
Well, I was already thinking about DS2 while I was making DS1. Whenever you're creating a new game or a new IP, it's difficult to establish a game system after just the first game. This was the same for Metal Gear and Stealth, so I've learned from past experience. So, for the first Death Stranding, I was already envisioning a sequel as I was making the first one. It was already in my mind. I had all the details worked out too. But then, 3 months after DS1 release, COVID happened, and it's still happening today. There was a lot that I thought about during the pandemic and the way the world was headed. My previous screenplay did not make sense anymore. So I rewrote all of it.
あらゆるエンタメに言
The
えると思う
ideas you may have had pre-COVID are more than likely no longer applicable post-COVID, given what the users, the audience, have gone through. I think the same can be said for every type of entertainment, and I think creators of all media think this way. And so DS2 is the result of restarting from zero. At the end of the teaser, you'll see the line, "Should we have connected?" That is the theme this time around. The last game was a rope game where you connected the divided, isolated people. Connecting was righteous. Then the pandemic occurred. So now the question is, what happens from here? And DS2 is all about that.
I can't wait to learn more. And yeah, that phrase, "should we have connected?" It's almost like that sense of regret of sort of you should have done something before that you haven't, and now you realize that you didn't have the opportunity. So yeah, I'm very excited to see where your mind is going to take us for DS2, and it's been great to talk with you today. And of course, all the fans will be talking for many months about DS2, and I know in the coming weeks we're gonna have some other special episodes of the Brain Structure with some special guests to talk more about DS2.
そうですね。ちょっと今は、ティザーで
Yes, for now, I want people to discuss the teaser. Have fun with it as you think about what may or may not happen. Use games as topic of conversation. Use it as an ingredient to create communication.
But we have many questions, and I'm sure the speculation on Reddit and online is going lots of places, and we look forward to learning more about it. Well, this has been a very special episode of Brain Structure. That's it for today's episode, but as I mentioned, Hideo and I will be back with some special guests in the coming weeks related to DS2, and that's all I'll say for now. Brain Structure's mailbox is still open, so please continue sending us any messages or questions you have for Hideo, your thoughts on the podcast, and guests or topics you would like us to cover on the show. The link to the message form can be found in the episode description.
ということで、来週のヒデオ
We'll see you again on next week's episode of Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure.
さようなら。
Hideo Kojima presents Brain Structure is a production by Spotify Studios in association with Kojima Productions and Fam Inc. TGA, the Jeff Sanser MC, Jeff Keighley. Narrator, Owen Maki. Music, Silent Poets. Visual design, Mechikuro. Producer, Hiro Furuki. Director, Kohei Takizawa. Executive producer at Spotify, Asami Sekine. Special thanks to Kojima Productions, Ayako Terashima, Masafumi Chiba, Miki Suga, and Aki Saito. Hosted by Hideo Kojima.
Wow, that was a lot of behind-the-scenes scoops on Death Stranding. And this being the episode right after the announcement of DS2, I was like, what? Really? The whole time? I gotta play the game again right now. On the next episode, we're going to continue hyping up DS with special guest, the one and only Norman Reedus, who will be returning to the world of Death Stranding as Sam Porter Bridges. Tune in to hear their deep dive into Death Stranding. You don't want to miss it.